Rescue workers are continuing searching for dozens of people still missing after a building collapse in Miami, Florida. The Minneapolis policeman who killed George Floyd in 2020 has been sentenced to 22.5 years in prison. And 1 out of 4 Cubans have received at least one dose of the domestically developed Abdala Covid-19 vaccine. Hello and welcome to TeleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. In the United States, Minneapolis policeman Derek Chauvin was sentenced to 22 years in prison for the murder of George Floyd in May 2010. Judge Peter Cahill's sentence underlined the officer's cruelty and abuse of his position of authority, aggravating factors that allow him to give him a harsher sentence. During the arrest of George Floyd in May 2020, Chauvin suffocated his victim, pressing his knee against Floyd's neck, who several times shouted he was unable to breathe. The murder sparked nationwide anti-racist protests, prompting demands for structural reforms of police departments and laws. Chauvin's sentence was one of the longest given a former police officer for using illegal deadly force in the United States. Rescue workers are continuing searching for dozens of people still missing after a building collapse in Miami, Florida. Officials have reported that a fire at the collapsed building is hampering rescue efforts as authorities race to recover more victims suspected to be under the rubble. The rescuers are using infrared technology, water and foam to battle the blaze, whose source has not been established yet. Nearly 160 people are still missing after the collapse, and at least 4 have been confirmed dead. In other news, Colombians have started to use art to protest against President Iván Duque. Visual arts are being used to protest in the national strike, which was launched on April 28. Protesters are demanding President Iván Duque to stop violation of human rights and violence against demonstrators. The artists are also using sculptures to pay tribute to those falling under police violence. The United Nations recently called on the Colombian government to launch an independent inquiry into the deaths of protesters in the city of Cali, where clashes with security forces have been most deadly. Salvadorian President Nayib Bukele has started a program to promote the use of Bitcoin. President Bukele announced that he was going to donate an equivalent of $30 in Bitcoin to every Salvadorian citizen to promote its use. However, he said the use of this cryptocurrency will not be mandatory. El Salvador's Legislative Assembly approved a law on June to make Bitcoin a legal tender in the country, making it the first nation to do so.
This will be the only Bitcoins that the person who does not want to receive Bitcoins will receive. Why? Because they will be given for free. When opening the app, they will receive the equivalent of 30 USD in Bitcoin. Remittances, the people who send them as well as the people who receive them, know that remittances have commissions. They pay high costs for sending and have several problems. In this case, with Bitcoins, these problems are eliminated.
2 former ministers of Bolivia's de facto regime have been declared in abstentia as they are being prosecuted for fraud rather than murder. They are Arturo Murillo and Luis Fernando Lopez, ministers of the Interior and Defense respectively, who were in charge of the most brutal repression during the year-long regime of Yanine Añez, who is in prison for her participation in the coup against President Evo Morales in 2019. They are not being prosecuted for the murders, however, but for the overprice of $2.3 million in the purchase of tear gas canisters. Judge Claudia Castro's resolution allows the Attorney General's office to proceed the trial in abstentia. Murillo was recently arrested in the United States on charges of corruption, and Lopez is believed to be hiding in Brazil. The Chilean Congress has given authorities a green light to extend the state of emergency and reinforce other measures to reduce COVID-19 infections. In spite of their criticism of President Sebastián Piñera's handling of the pandemic, most opposition deputies and senators back his request for an extension of the state of emergency. The emergency allows authorities to restrict civil liberties, impose curfews, quarantines, regulate distribution of essential goods and services, among others. Since February, Chile pioneered the massive vaccination of its population, but infection rates continue increasing. More than 32,000 people have died in Chile since the first case was detected in March 2020. 1 out of 4 Cubans have been vaccinated against COVID-19, with more than 5 million doses applied so far using the Abdala jab. Health authorities in the country announced that so far 24% of the population has been immunized with at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. According to a study carried out by England's Oxford University, Cuba currently leads the percentage of people vaccinated in a day per 100 inhabitants. This is the result of an effective alliance between industry, research centers, and the public health system, the study says. Cuba has developed 5 vaccines, of which 2 have reached the 3rd and final stage of testing. One of them, called Abdala, has proven a 92% efficiency in preventing the disease.
We believe that Cuba will be the first country to be able to vaccinate its entire population by 2021 with its own vaccines. We will have to see what will happen with the efficacy of the sum of 2 doses of Soberana 02 and 1 dose of Soberana Plus, which is what we will present to our regulatory authority when we have this final data.
Meanwhile, Venezuela has received the first batch of the Abdala Covid-19 vaccine developed in Cuba. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez received the shipment, which is part of the agreement signed between Venezuela and Cuba for the development of 12 million doses of the Abdala vaccine against the coronavirus. This comes after the scientific community confirmed the vaccine candidate has shown an efficiency of more than 92%. Cuban ambassador to Venezuela, Dagoberto Rodriguez, stressed that the agreement is part of the close relations and solidarity between both countries.
And there is not the slightest doubt that in this significant act, where we are confirming the reception of the Cuban vaccine Abdala, Bolivia remains undefeated. In this triumph over those who try to oppress our people, over those who try to dominate us.
The arrival of the first batch of the Abdala vaccine is a sign of a close, brotherly relationship between our countries. With the arrival of this vaccine, the vial doesn't only carry a vaccine that can help to alleviate the pandemic, to save lives, but in each vial comes the sentiment of love and brotherhood of the Cuban people.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. The Bolivarian Alliance for the Americas bloc have reaffirmed concern over the United States blockade on Cuba. In the final declaration, the heads of state rejected unilateral sanctions and blockades against Cuba and Venezuela, highlighted the achievements of Cuba in producing world-class COVID-19 vaccines, and rejected the destabilization attempts against the government of Nicaragua. They also announced political initiatives to strengthen regional autonomous mechanisms, such as the Union of the South American States and CELAC, the Community of Latin American and Caribbean Countries. The summit took place along with the anniversary of the Carabobo battle, which sealed the Venezuelan independence in 1821. During this summit, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro talked about the possible scenario of a world without empires.
This here is the 21st century, no doubt that the one that marks the end of all empires. It will be the century of the rising of a world of peace, a humane world. As our singer Ali Primera said, so humanity can be humane.
On the other hand, the Prime Minister of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerrit, rejected foreign intervention in democratic governments such as Bolivia and Venezuela. Skerrit himself was the target of a failed destabilization scheme in 2019, orchestrated by the head of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro.
What has happened here in Venezuela and what has happened in Bolivia should never be allowed to happen anywhere else, where these interventionist attitudes believe that they must dictate to the people who are their leadership, who should lead them and when they should lead them. But we should not allow them, as citizens of this region to decide where we stand on the decision, based on who is in government or how they lead.
Rob Gonsalves, Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, praised the late revolutionary leaders Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez for bringing together the Bolivarian alliance.
From the beginning of Alba TCP, from the inaugural meeting until today, so I know for a son the heroic work of Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, I can write a book about it, as to how this came about and what transpired. And this is an extraordinary organization, Alba TCP. It is an integration movement of the highest quality, benefiting the free and independent people across the Caribbean and Latin American civilization, and what we engage in daily in our struggle for survival and the improvement of the life of our people, the quality of those lives, our living and production.
Meanwhile, Grenada and Venezuela have reached bilateral agreements in food crop production and agricultural research. The agreement is the result of a bilateral meeting between the agricultural ministers of Grenada, David Held, and Venezuela, Wilmar Castro. They met during the Bolivarian Trade Agreement ALBA Summit held in Caracas on Thursday. They also discussed trading agricultural production from both countries. Following the meeting, the officials visited a small goat farm located in a residential area of the Venezuelan capital. The COVID-19 Delta variant, which was first identified in India, has been discovered in South Africa. The country's Minister of Health has confirmed that the third wave of coronavirus infections in South Africa is being driven by the Delta variant. The minister warned that the country's current resurgence could be the worst than the second wave. The Delta variant, first identified in India, accounts for almost all new infections in the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, South Africa, which is the continent's worst affected by the coronavirus, recorded 18,000 new COVID-19 infections and 215 deaths on Friday.
Scientists, after their sequencing experiments, have discovered that we have a new variant that is prevalent in our country. This new variant is called a Delta. You know that it's not a new in terms of existing only in South Africa. It exists in other countries. So
an outbreak of cholera in Nigeria have left 296 people dead, and in the capital Abuja, 91 new cases were reported. Almost 11,000 people have been diagnosed with cholera since January 2021 in Nigeria. The lack of potable water and the impossibility of quick and efficient medical intervention are factors in the African country that could lead to an increase in deaths and the spread of the epidemic. In 2017, more than 150,000 cholera cases struck Africa and over 3,000 deaths were reported. Meanwhile, 92 million people in the continent still drink water from unsafe sources in rural communities where piped water is limited.
Not less than 35 staff work here on a shift.
Rwandan President Paul Kagame has visited the Democratic Republic of Congo for a bilateral meeting with his counterpart Felix Tshisekedi. The two met at the Rwanda's border town Rubavu and discussed the damage caused by the Nyiragongo volcano eruption, the security situation in Eastern DRC, and different trade agreements. Both nations enjoy warm diplomatic relations and are looking forward to strengthen bilateral ties in trade, investment, and people-to-people exchange. Rwanda and the DRC have recently witnessed an increase in cross-border trade.
And a number of agreements. I believe this is just the beginning. There are many areas that we are going to come to in which we can cooperate to build a solid relationship, but also basis for cooperation between our two countries.
Since I became president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, we have wasted so many years glaring at each other, living in tension, in a situation of war, in shared hatred. And now that is enough. It is time to experience the other side, the sharing of peace and love.
Anti-government protesters have gathered in the Slovenian capital Ljubljana as the country celebrates its 30th Independence Day. While Prime Minister Janez Janša was addressing the official independence rally in the capital, a few streets away, thousands of activists, union members, and the center-left opposition held a rival event. Janša, who came to power in March 2020, is accused of exploiting the coronavirus emergency to target opposition media outlets and for having destroyed the country's democratic institutions. And we have more stories coming up after one last break, so don't go away. Welcome back. The Russian Defense Ministry has warned the United Kingdom and the United States not to send their ships into the Black Sea after the recent incident near the Crimea region. Moscow said one of its warships fired warning shots at a British ship on Wednesday to force it out of an area near Crimea, which Russia claims as its territorial waters.
The epic fiasco of provocation committed by the British destroyer Defender in the Black Sea, which abruptly changed its course in Russian territorial waters after warning shots from a guard ship, will long remain a fragrant stain for the reputation of the Royal Navy forces. In this connection, we urge Pentagon and the UK Navy commanders who send their ship to the Black Sea, don't tempt fate in vain by following Ukrainian admirals of Mosquito Fleet, but to rely on common sense.
Russia has recorded its highest daily COVID-19 death toll since the beginning of 2021. Russia has been experiencing a sharp spike in COVID-19 infections, where more than 21,000 new cases have been recorded in the past 24 hours. The country's National Coronavirus Task Force has reported that 619 people have died over the past day, which is the highest number since December. More than a third of the new infections across the country were registered in the Russian capital, Moscow.
For the last week, the number of patients has increased by 150 comparing to the numbers we had before. The tendency of the last day is that we don't see a disease.
India has recorded almost 50,000 new COVID-19 cases in the past 24 hours. India is rapidly to contain a highly transmissible new variant of COVID-19 known as Delta Plus variant. Health experts say the variant could evade antibodies induced by previous infections or vaccines and cause strain. The Delta variant was first identified in India last year and is a major contributor to the country's second wave of infections that peaked in April-May. Musical events have returned in South Korea as the country lifts its most of COVID-19 restrictions. Thousands of music fans attended a concert in capital Seoul as South Korea began easing restrictions on large concerts and sport events last week. The government also announced it was going to lose some quarantine restrictions for fully vaccinated overseas visitors. Almost 12 million people have been vaccinated against COVID-19 in South Korea, which is about 23% of the country's population.
Although I am a bit worried, various tests, including using self-testing kits, are conducted before we enter, and people seem to be distancing themselves from each other. I expect things to be safe as long as we can follow these safety measures.
Spain has lifted its preventive measure to wear face masks in outdoor places starting this Saturday. The decision comes after more than 400 days since the beginning of the pandemic and was put in place to control the spread of the coronavirus. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez announced the lifting of the nationwide measure, which had become increasingly unpopular as the summer months approached last week. Face masks continue to be obligatory outside if people cannot keep 1.5 meters distance, and is obligatory in indoor places such as public transport and shops.
The first thing I did when I left the hotel was throw the mask in the air, delighted and happy. I know we need to respect wearing masks indoors, but I'm very happy.
Yo, por ejemplo, vengo ahora de ponerme la segunda dosis de la vacuna. I, for example, have just had my second dose of the vaccine. I know that I am protected, and the elderly are protected, the grandparents. But we can still be infected, so any safety measure is good and coherent.
And residents of Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, have blamed the United States for recent clashes between the Taliban and Afghan government forces. The residents say the U.S. is responsible for the escalating conflicts in Afghanistan, and its purpose was not to bring peace to the country. This comes a week after Afghanistan's former president Hamid Karzai said the United States has failed in its mission of bringing stability to the war-torn nation. The U.S. has already started withdrawing its forces from Afghanistan after 20 years of conflict.
All the Afghan people know that the United States is not here to bring peace. They are here to their political game. They are here to get close to the countries in this region to threaten them, such as China, Russia, or Iran, and try to get power in this region.
And with this, we come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.